Shamdelaya Zerim Ngavadela Panden Sikyong Bomram Balosan Senge Choke Sungshe Nangyo.
Honorable Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Singye of Central Tibetan Administration will deliver Kasha's statement.
Pimilana Miboti Konsikyam Genshimuchola Kuchata Gamnigindugi de Mangzo Kao Sumgi Zezo number and the ne Shunde Mayim Bitsobaka Guzab number Mima number Luptu number Samal Taringe Kashak Sumju Tudengi Sungde Shize Putone Jalonongo Yore de Netanda Chozo Soso ne Chozo Sungshe Putone Nang Dubutang and Dana Shintande and the Chigekane Kunde Mamushi Payode Sungshe Nangi Mamushi Yuza and Tale the Sigonki Sungshe Puini Jalo Nang Mogobache and ye Injitone Shuchova Che Shuetin Tanayang Tsujunila Jega Yure Shuayim. His Excellency, Seretse Kama and Kama, our chief guest for today's event, former President of Botswana, has taken the time and literally trouble to come all the way to Dharamsala to be with His Holiness Dalai Lama, to be with us, to stand up for democracy and human rights, and to support Tibetan people, for which, on behalf of all the Tibetans, I would like to express our deep admiration for your courage, for your principled decision to be with us. So thank you very much. Our special guest, Honorable Shanta Kumarji, we all know him. He is the co-chair of India Parliamentary Group for Tibet, former Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh, and has been a steadfast supporter of Tibet for many decades. And we all know India has done the most for Tibetan people, and we are forever grateful to this great nation and people of India. Thank you very much for coming today. From Germany, we have Honorable Thomas Mann and Honorable Michael Brandt. From Slovakia, we have Honorable Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, Lucia Doris Nikolsonova and Martin Polesic. And from Canada, Honorable Linda Duncan and Garnet Guinness. From South Africa, Honorable Santosh Vinita Kalyan. From Peru, Alberto Di Belondi. From Italy, Honorable Antonella Inserti and Matteo Bianchi. From Taiwan, Honorable Mi Nuyu. And this year we have special guests, our Chinese brothers and sisters from all over the world. They have come here to show solidarity and specifically support middle way approach. I think we have 60 strong Chinese members from all over the world. So this year, 60th anniversary, 60 is a good sign. I had the privilege of meeting our delegation for the last few days, and I have been saying Dharamsala went through quite a cold, bitter winter. It's normally in the famous TV series, we say winter is coming. But with your presence here, we can say winter is going and the weather is good. As per Tibetan tradition, gods and deities are with us. Friends like you, our future looks bright and sunny. Thank you very much. And you have definitely sent a powerful message, a moving message to Tibetans inside Tibet who are watching and listening as to what is world doing for the cause of Tibet. And your presence here sends a message that we are with you. We are for democracy, we are for human rights of the Tibetan people, and that means a lot to us. Now, let me read the statement of the Kashag. When the People's Liberation Army of China first marched into Tibet, they promised to build one road which would bring peace and prosperity for the Tibetan people. However, once the road was completed, PLA's tanks, guns, and more soldiers came and occupied the entire Tibetan plateau. 60 years ago, on this very day in 1959, the Tibetan people rose up against the occupying Chinese army. With their fists raised in the air, our brothers and sisters marched together to make it clear that the land of snow is a Tibetan territory. Tibet belongs to Tibetans, they shouted. Standing steadfast in unity, they protected and ensured the safety of our root guru, our Tsawel Lama, His Holiness, the great 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet. Over the last 6 decades, the government in Beijing has brutally repressed the Tibetan people, denied us our basic rights, and has consistently pursued systematic policies to crack down on Tibetan language, culture, unique identity, and spiritual practices. In essence, China has deliberately aimed to eradicate Tibet's civilization from the face of this earth. In this year's annual report, Human Rights Watch states that the Chinese authorities have used, I quote, nationwide anti-crime campaign to encourage people to denounce members of their communities on the slightest suspicion of sympathy to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Furthermore, crackdown on human rights defenders has intensified in recent years. Language advocate Tashi Wangchuk is currently serving an arbitrary 5-year jail sentence. His only crime was advocating for Tibetan people's cultural and linguistic rights as enshrined in China's own constitution. Recently, China has also banned Tibetan children from attending informal Tibetan language classes held at their local monasteries. As a prelude to its ambition to control the global surveillance network, China uses Tibet as a testing ground for high-tech surveillance methods. Using a grid system of social management, Communist Party strengthens its Orwellian control over both the electronic and physical surveillance of Tibet. Additionally, since 2008, roadblocks and checkpoints have increasingly dotted all major roads in urban as well as rural areas of Tibet. Chinese authorities have assigned at least one officer, formal or informal, to monitor 20 Tibetans in the so-called Tibet Autonomous Region. In the dystopian world it has created, often a son is pitted against father, a daughter against mother, sibling against sibling. Commonly known as the Third Pole, Tibetan Plateau holds the world's largest reservoir of glaciers apart from the 2 poles. Tibet, therefore, is the source of some of the largest rivers in Asia, with over 1 billion people depending on these waters. Consequently, rising temperatures on the high plateau endangers the livelihood of hundreds of millions of people in Asia and also negatively amplifies global climate change. China's deeply flawed environmental policies have already turned the Tibetan Plateau into destructive mining hubs, and the unbridled damming of rivers makes the situation even more dangerous. The assaults on Tibet and her people have been multi-pronged. Over 2 million Tibetan farmers, particularly nomads, have been forcibly removed from their ancestral land and relocated into large-scale ghettos without any alternative opportunities to lead a dignified and traditional life. As a resentment to these harsh and repressive policies, 153 Tibetans have committed self-immolation since 2009, with the most recent one committed by a 23-year-old man named Dopo on November 4, 2018. While committing self-immolation, the protesters have called for the return of His Holiness Dalai Lama to Tibet and freedom for Tibetans. Freedom House has listed Tibet as the world's second least free region for the last 4 consecutive years. Likewise, Reporters Without Borders express, I quote, outrage over the systematic violation of press freedom, unquote, and has stated that it is harder for journalists to go to Tibet than North Korea. I'm sorry, it's harder for journalists to go to Tibet, to go to North Korea than to Tibet, I'm sorry. My Tibetan brothers and sisters around the world, in spite of living through the darkest period in our history, we have stood together in unity and achieved a great many things against all odds. Our journey over the past 6 decades has also been that of hope, resilience, and resistance. Beginning in the early 1950s in eastern Tibet, each of China's tyrannical policy has been met with resolute defiance. The Tibetan National Uprising in March 1959, brave resistance in prisons and concentration camps in the 1960s and 70s, and the large-scale demonstrations in 1980s have all shown that the Tibetan people have consistently and collectively fought for their rights, freedom, and justice. In 2008, the whole world witnessed a new generation of Tibetans in a nationwide uprising against the Chinese occupation and ignited a spark of unwavering courage to assert for their identity and dignity. They declared, "Our voices will not be suppressed. Our commitment will not falter." This resolute resistance continues. Similarly, in exile, we have not only rebuilt ourselves, but also become a successful and thriving community. When our grandfathers and grandmothers first arrived in India 60 years ago, their fate was uncertain and their future unknown. But under the guidance of His Holiness Dalai Lama, they re-established themselves. Shovel by shovel and brick by brick, they built schools, monasteries, nunneries, and settlements. Families formed communities to sow seeds of hope in their cornfields. Men and women renewed their skills to weave carpets and pave a better future for their children. Through these institutions and communities, we have managed to restore and revive our language, culture, and most importantly, our identity. The depth of our history, traditions, spirituality, and determination enabled us to transform our narrative from that of victims to survivors. The strength of our cause and our ability to efficiently implement development programs over the decades have won us continued support and admiration from our friends, supporters, and aid groups around the world. Under His Holiness' leadership, Central Tibetan administration has evolved into a robust democracy in exile based on the rule of law, gender equality, and universal suffrage. In 2011, His Holiness Dalai Lama devolved his political authority to a democratically elected leader. This CTA today represents the aspirations of Tibetans inside Tibet and Tibetans in exile scattered over 40 countries around the world. It oversees 71 Tibetan settlements, 276 monasteries and nunneries, 68 schools, having a literacy rate higher than many countries in South and Southeast Asia, hospitals, clinics, and old age homes. All of these institutions and centers cater to the needs of Tibetan refugees in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. Our 13 offices of Tibet serve as official liaison channels in as many countries. However, our success is not confined to our communities alone. The Tibetan freedom movement has garnered insurmountable international support with Tibet support groups in 54 countries and 40 countries hosting parliamentary support groups. Today, Japan hosts the largest all-parliamentary Tibet support group comprising of 90 members. Similarly, Czech Parliamentary Support Group for Tibet is the largest in Europe with over 50 representatives from both the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate. In 2018, some of the most powerful member states at the United Nations Human Rights Council called upon China to stop the gross human rights violations in Tibet. We are both inspired and encouraged by support for Tibet from countries like Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Japan, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and the United States at China's third cycle of Universal Periodic Review at the United Nations Human Rights Council. Just as importantly, in December last year, the United States took an unprecedented step by passing the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act. This bipartisan law denies entry to America to Chinese officials deemed responsible for restricting American officials and journalists' access to Tibet. The President of the United States further strengthened support for Tibet with the Asia Reassurance Act, which secures special economic support to promote and preserve Tibetan culture, education, and environmental conservation, as well as sustainable development. We are aware that the Chinese government pays only lip service to words like cooperation and dialogue. If indeed it earnestly believes that cooperation can bring world peace, it should renew its dialogue with the envoys of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. As we have stated repeatedly, the envoys are ready to talk and peacefully resolve the issue of Tibet through the middle way approach. Instead of looking to end the 60 years of repression in Tibet, the Chinese government has come out with a 0 and 100 strategy. Under this new strategy, zero news from international media and exiled Tibetans will be allowed into Tibet, and projects 100% official propaganda about Tibet to the outside world and Tibetan community in exile. Hence, we must remain vigilant. The Chinese government assumes that the issue of Tibet will fade with time. But our experience of over half a century makes us believe otherwise. The young Tibetans in Tibet experience repression and resistance, whereas young Tibetans in exile learn about freedom and democracy. Together, the young generation in Tibet in exile are determined in seeking truth and justice. This new generation of Tibetans is committed to preserving their unique identity and pursuing their dignity. They are prepared to carry forward the baton of the struggle until the Tibet issue is resolved. Ultimately, it is for the Tibetan people to decide their own destiny and that of Tibet. To honor and offer our deep gratitude for the support we have received for the last 60 years, the Kashag dedicated 2018 as the year of gratitude. Accordingly, we began with Thank You India and ended with Thank You America, with programs in many other countries around the world to express our profound appreciation to old and new friends. I once again want to thank our dear friends in India and around the world for their continued support. My friends, the tragic case of Tibet is a stark reminder of how much work is left to be done. 60 years of the occupation of Tibet and repression of the Tibetan people is far too long. To ensure that Tibet's freedom struggle marches forward, the Kasha today officially declares 2019 as the year of commitment. I want to call upon freedom-loving people of the world to commit to end oppression in Tibet and to commit to fight against impunity. To Tibetan people everywhere, let us continue our commitment to struggle for justice. Let us continue to strengthen our resilience so we can be united with our brothers and sisters in Tibet in freedom. Let us commit to the return of His Holiness, the great 14th Dalai Lama, to the Potala Palace in Lhasa, where he rightfully belongs. Long live His Holiness, long live Tibet, Pögyalo!